Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our Mac Admins monthly huddle. So today we have John Britton, co-founder and CEO of Workbrew, to give us a presentation about Workbrew, and he will be with us for an hour to demo, or you guys have any questions, you are free to reach out to him. Thank you, John. Yeah, welcome. Yep, it's a regular slide about our Mac Admins India. So we started our small group in 2009, and then we expanded. So now we are in multiple platforms like Peb, LinkedIn, Slack, YouTube, and Jamf Nation user group. I request everyone to visit, and almost all the details are shared everywhere. And we have our own website, which is macadmins.in. Yep. So this QR code, or the QR code in the corner of this presentation, will take you to the Mac Admins website, where if you want to forward it to your friends or others who want to join our community, they can join with this QR code.
Karthik, sorry to interrupt. I'm not sure whether it is only for me. I'm not able to see your slides moving. It just.
Yeah, we're on the first slide still.
Yeah, we're on the welcome slide.
Yeah. Okay. Let me check. Yep. Yep. So this is the QR code which I was talking about. Yep. This will be our agenda today. So Workbrew, John Britton will take care of it, and we'll talk about our Mac Admins India platform update. And we are planning for some in-person meet sometime this year. So we'll talk about it after, might be like in last 30 minutes. Yep. Welcome, John. And so John is going to show us an exciting, Workbrew, which is a software secure delivery platform. Many of us might have heard about a home brew or brew in our day-to-day life, but this is the first time even I'm hearing about a tool called Workbrew. And really the tagline really excites us, that it is secure software delivery platform, right? Because the word secure comes, it's really very important for every admin to give extra heat to the same, so that we secure our devices. Our primary role in our organization for everyone is to secure the our software delivery or anything around our endpoints. So thank you, John, for joining us in the morning. And yeah, it's time for you now. Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Hi, everybody. Just before we get started, I would like to say a couple of logistical items. So as I'm presenting, I have the chat open. So if you put any messages in there, I'll see them as we're going. If it's appropriate, I might address your chat messages during the presentation, but also at the end of the presentation, I'll look through the chat and answer any questions. There's also a Q&A feature. So if you have a specific question, put it in there. If you have other comments, just put it in the chat. Yeah, and then the plan for today, I'll show you a brief presentation, and then we'll get into a demo of the Workbrew product. So let me share my screen and get us started. All right, so hopefully you can see my screen now. This is a presentation about Workbrew. Workbrew is a secure software delivery platform, and today's topic is secure software delivery at work. As mentioned, my name is John Britton. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Workbrew. Today, we're going to talk about 5 things. We're going to talk about Homebrew, the open source package manager, Workbrew, which is a control plane or a management mechanism for Brew. We're going to talk about deployment, how you get this onto your devices. Then I'll give you a demo in the product. And at the end, if there are any questions, we'll go through those in real time. So to start, I'd like to talk about the team behind Workbrew. So there are 3 co-founders of Workbrew, myself, Vanessa, and Mike. The 3 of us worked together at GitHub for quite some time, and we all have backgrounds in developer tooling. Prior to GitHub, I also was a developer evangelist at a company called Twilio, which is quite well known for their communications APIs. And I've spent my entire career working on developer tooling. Vanessa is one of the members of the Homebrew Project Leadership Committee. So she's involved in the governance and management of the open source project. And Mike is the project leader. Mike's been involved with Homebrew for close to 15 years, and he is the project leader of Homebrew. I am a contributor. I'm not directly involved as a maintainer, but I have code in Homebrew that if you're using Homebrew, you've got some of my code on your machine as well. And then our team is full of Homebrew contributors. So we have several different software engineers on our team who are also maintainers of Homebrew. So we have quite a lot of experience with Homebrew. So what exactly is Homebrew? So Homebrew is essentially an app store for developers. Homebrew is open source. It's full of open source software, and it is maintained by a community of thousands of contributors. And over its 15-year history, it's become sort of an industry standard. So when Apple released Mac OS 10 with its Unix underpinnings, one of the missing things was a package manager. If you'd ever used a Linux distribution before, you might be accustomed to having a package manager on your operating system, and that was absent from Mac OS. So when Homebrew was created, it was meant to fill that gap, and it became very popular, and it's installed on tens of millions of devices now. It looks something like this. When you open up your command line, you just type in the command brew, and that gives you all the functionalities of package manager. Install will tell you to pick a package that you want to have placed on your machine, and then the name of the package, like Python. And Brew will go out and it will fetch all the source code, it will fetch the binaries, and it will put them in the right places on your machine, so it just works. So I remember when I first used a package manager for the first time, I was a university student, and I had been struggling with like make and compiling things myself. And this was in the days of SourceForge and tarballs that you would download, from random web pages and try to build things yourself. And as soon as I found my first package manager, it kind of changed my life. And going back to a time before package managers, and Brew is, an amazing, valuable tool on Mac OS. So Homebrew contains close to 15,000 packages in the official Homebrew repositories. And really, they're a very wide-ranging group of packages. Everything from open source software like programming languages, IDEs, databases, software libraries. It even includes closed source desktop applications. So Homebrew has a functionality called Homebrew Cast, where it can be used to distribute binary software that's provided by upstream vendors. You could install, for example, Google Chrome or Visual Studio Code or kind of any desktop tool. And lastly, Homebrew, the underpinning architecture is such that there are kind of two components. There's the library of packages, and then there's the infrastructure of getting those packages onto your machine. And so that infrastructure can be used to install any package, not just official Homebrew packages, but you can create your own software repositories called taps, where you can install packages that you create. And this is useful for internal software, things like internal command line tools or company-specific or team-specific data analysis and other utilities. Homebrew is ubiquitous. It's installed on an estimated 35 million devices. It's used by tens of millions of developers daily. It's essentially the default package manager on Mac OS. And it also is, for most people, many people don't know about this, but it's multi-platform. So you can run Homebrew on Linux and on Windows under WSL. And this is really valuable for having consistency across your entire workflow, across your team. So we have a number of folks that will use Homebrew on the desktop for the developer environment, and then when they use their source control, maybe they use GitHub and GitHub Actions, they use Homebrew to set up their environments, and they can use all the same configuration files and all the same packages across those different platforms. But Homebrew, it's not perfect. It has some problems, and it's not that Homebrew itself is flawed, but Homebrew is meant to be a single player experience. It's meant for an individual developer to install it on their machine, configure it the way that they want to, and manage it themselves. So what this means is that there's no real collaborative features. There's no visibility into how the tool is being used for the administrators within the company. And there's no policies around what's permitted or not permitted. And there's no way to know if something has gone awry. So this is where companies have to come up with solutions for themselves. And generally, they fall into three different categories of solutions of how companies handle this today. The first and most common, we say, is do nothing. Engineers use Brew, and it's not officially part of the company stack. It's not that it's not disallowed, but it's also not permitted. And so people just use it and everybody looks the other way and they kind of just say, we're not going to worry about this. The second category, which is a little bit less common, but still quite popular, is what we call informed trust. And this is kind of where Brew is officially part of the company's stack. There might be documentation like onboarding guides or best practices around how Brew should be used. And maybe there's a little bit of training for the team that says, whenever you add a new dependency into your stack, make sure that you review it for compliance, whether it's licensing, you check that it was updated recently, you scan it for vulnerabilities, et cetera, et cetera. But there's no enforcement. There's nobody saying this must happen. It's just kind of a recommendation. And then lastly, by far the least common, but and most work is to roll your own solution. And this is where companies will write their own code to centrally manage Brew within their company. And this is really only something that I see in the largest companies. So if you talk about, the very big public companies with, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of employees, it's really not acceptable to them to leave Brew on the machines totally unmanaged. And so I know quite a few examples of these very large companies where they'll write their own internal version of Brew, or they'll take the open source project, they'll fork it and then make changes to it to put some kind of guardrails or controls around it. Or they'll write scripts and glue code to kind of stitch their own system together so that their engineering teams have some guardrails around how this works. So it's definitely a challenge to manage Homebrew for any fleet that's of a reasonable size. So this is where Workbrew comes in. When we started Workbrew, we went around and we talked to all of these companies and we just asked them, what are the biggest challenges that you're facing with Homebrew and how can we help? As Homebrew experts, we really understand kind of how the system works and what the capabilities are. It's a very powerful tool, but for a small team or even a large company with a small IT department, it's not really within their wheelhouse to go out and build a management platform for Brew. It'd be much better if they could go in and use an existing tool. And so that's why we as experts in Homebrew are kind of well positioned to build this tool. So our mission is to build an enterprise-ready Homebrew that's loved by developers and approved by security. It essentially gives you a way to deploy, manage, and secure Homebrew at scale. And kind of the main areas of functionality are developer productivity, which is essentially making it as easy as possible for developers to get onboarded. Setting up all of their dependencies, making it easy to get any kinds of tools that they need to do their job, and standardizing and making those environments consistent across engineers and across teams. Analytics observability. So one of the biggest things that we heard when we were talking to early customers was that for them, Homebrew represents a risk because they just don't know what's going on. And so with Workbrew, the idea is to give visibility to the folks who need it to make sure that the company is staying safe and secure. Remote management. As I'm sure you're familiar, as Mac admins, there are a variety of different tools for managing, endpoints, and for the most part, none of them have any integration with Homebrew. And keeping Homebrew packages up to date can be challenging. Specifying which Homebrew packages need to be installed can be challenging, and scripting this yourself can also be challenging due to the various permissions, how Homebrew is owned, and things like that. So we have a set of tools around, installing, upgrading, removing, and just managing Homebrew across the entire fleet from one place. And then lastly is security and compliance. And so we have a vulnerabilities tool that allows you to see any known vulnerabilities in your fleet, see which devices they impact, and immediately remediate those vulnerabilities with a single click. I should also mention that just in the last few weeks, we also completed our SOC 2 assessment and passed that. And so for folks that have requirements around their vendors that are using things like Workbrew, we're in that kind of certified state of SOC 2 compliance. So I want to talk a bit about the architecture of Workbrew, and this is really kind of the core takeaway here is that it's just Homebrew. under the hood. We don't have a fork of Homebrew. We don't have our own custom version. We're using open source Homebrew. And anytime that we see a need for improvements or features that would benefit the Homebrew community, we make those features as pull requests to the open source project, and we contribute them upstream. So most of our team is contributing to Homebrew on a pretty regular basis. And we're making use of the underlying functionality of Homebrew as the foundation of Workbrew. And then on top of Homebrew, you can think about Workbrew as kind of a control plane. So if Homebrew is a single player experience, you might have 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000 devices that have Homebrew installed. On top of all of that, you have Workbrew to check in with all of those devices and see what's going on those devices and remotely manage them and ensure that they're secure and compliant and so on and so forth. So Workbrew's platform is made up of 3 pieces. One is the installer. Our installer is a PKG file that you can deploy. So it's a PKG file you can deploy with any MDM. The agent is a lightweight tool that kind of keeps metadata and sends it to the console so you can see what's going on in the devices. And it's also responsible for managing, remote management tasks. And lastly, you have the console, which is kind of the control center around all of those devices. So before we get into the demo, I want to walk through a little bit about the deployment mechanism for Workbrew. The folks that are involved in a deployment of Workbrew are generally the IT team, the security team, and engineering. And what's interesting about this is the engineers already know Homebrew and they use it every single day. And when we talk to companies of various sizes and different industries, what's usually happening is either the engineers are not allowed to use Homebrew and they need a way to get their team to approve it, or they're already using Homebrew, but IT and security are concerned and they want to take it away. And so Workbrew is a way to make sure that there's an approved way to use Brew at work, and the engineers are happy and they have the access to the tools they need, and the IT and security team has peace of mind and kind of not that much management activity to do once everything is set up. When Workbrew is installed onto an endpoint, you have the choice of kind of different permission models of how that device has access to Brew. By default, when you install Workbrew onto a device, if the end user of the device is a standard user without admin privileges, they're in what's called restricted mode. Essentially, Brew is installed on the device, but they have no access to use Brew at all. This is most commonly used for devices where maybe the user doesn't know how to use the terminal. So you might have a customer success person, or you might have a salesperson, or really anybody in your company that has a Mac, and you want to install from that library of 15,000 packages and give them all the tools they need to do their job and keep them up to date and have vulnerability scanning and all of that without the user having to understand what Brew is. Next is managed mode, and this is the most common among software engineers. So in managed mode, what happens, the way you put someone into managed mode is after Workbrew is installed on their device, you add them to a system group called Workbrew users. And any member of the Workbrew users group has access to run the brew command. Now, when Workbrew is installed, the brew command looks and feels and works just like normal Homebrew. But in fact, it's actually a secure CLI wrapping around Homebrew. And so what happens is a user that's using Workbrew, when they run Brew, every command that they run is checked against the policies to make sure that it's a safe command for them to run and that it's kind of audited and managed within their environment. So that is really powerful for making sure that the whole system is kept secure and kept within kind of the approved usage. Now, for an end user, what's really nice about this is you don't have to learn anything new. There's no user login. There's no special commands. It just works as Brew always has. The only case where something will be different is, for example, if you try to install some software that the company has deemed it's not permitted. Most of the cases where we see that happening are things like VPN software or tunneling software or torrenting software, certain things that are not appropriate for a work environment, or that if you work in a high compliance industry, like we see a lot of insurance, financial companies, where they just have rules around what can and can't be installed, they might have some things there. And then lastly is guided mode. And in guided mode, the way that a user gets put into guided mode is if they have admin privileges on their device. So if you're a sudo user, or you're able to temporarily escalate your privileges using a privilege escalation tool like SAP Privileges, or I think there's one from Jamf as well, then you're in guided mode. And what that means is that you still have all the same guardrails of managed Workbrew, but you have the ability to override those settings. And this is really useful for those companies that are fast-moving tech companies that might not need a strict rule around what's permitted and what's not permitted, but instead just want to have visibility into what's going on and auditability and accountability, and kind of leave things up to the end user. So we really don't take an opinion on what level of access control should be on the end user's device. We want to give the companies the right tools for the job. Now, when it comes to deployment, it's very easy to deploy Workbrew to 10, 100, 1,000, or even 10,000 devices using an MDM tool. Our installer is built for zero-touch deployment. So if you have a brand new Mac out of the box, it connects to your MDM tool, and Workbrew is installed automatically. And even the packages that are configured to be installed are installed by default. So when the user logs in for the first time, everything is up and running. In addition to that kind of automated rollout for a new device, the installer is built to be non-disruptive. So you can essentially install it to existing devices, even if they already have Homebrew installed. So when you install Workbrew onto an existing device with a Homebrew installation, they get upgraded to Workbrew, and the device is connected to the Workbrew console, and you get visibility into the device. But for the end user, all of their packages stay in place, and everything continues to work just as it always has. And what I'd like to point out, especially for this group, is that we have a free plan for Workbrew. And in the free plan for Workbrew, you get this automated deployment tool. You get this secure CLI, which can work on a device where the end user is not an admin, is not a member of a pseudo users group. It can even work on a device that has multiple user accounts. And you can deploy to an unlimited number of users and devices with Workbrew for free, and then access all of those devices via the Workbrew console to gain visibility into all of the installed packages and versions. So this is a really valuable tool, even in the free version. It's the easiest way and the best way to install Brew for a Mac admin. If your end users have developers, or if you want a system for managing, managing Brew and having some kind of peace of mind around it, use the free version, install it on your devices, and you'll have visibility, and you'll have a standard way to set up these environments. So now it's time to move into the demo, where I'll walk you through the Workbrew product. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides, and I'm going to switch over there. Then I'm also going to check the Q&A to see if anything's come up yet. I don't see any questions so far. So let's move on to, here we go. So hopefully you can see the Workbrew console. So I kind of gave you the architecture and whatnot already. So I think what we'll do first is just jump right into the dashboard here. So from the Workbrew console, you have a dashboard. The dashboard gives you a summary of kind of everything going on within your fleet. So you can see the vulnerable formula, so any vulnerabilities that you have, any outdated packages in the fleet, any devices that might have an outdated version of Workbrew that need to be updated, and any commands that you've tried to run that might not have succeeded on particular devices. And you can drill down and see kind of a summary of this right in the dashboard. So this is a at-a-glance look at what's going on in the fleet. But what I would like to do is spend some time looking at the visibility features. So I'm going to focus on all the things that are in the Workbrew free plan for unlimited devices first. So we have this devices view here. And from the devices view, you get a list of all the devices in your fleet. You can see the names of the devices. You can see what version of macOS they're on, what type of device it is, some summaries of installed packages, homebrew versions, and whatnot. And then down the left-hand side, you can check off some devices, and you can manage them using device groups. And so if you do add to group or create a new group, you can set up device groups so that you can manage teams, types of devices, departments, whatever makes sense for your organization. You can then see the group memberships on the devices list. And then lastly, you can see your device in your MDM. So we have two types of MDM integrations with Workbrew. One is the deployment. You can deploy Workbrew with any MDM tool. It works with every MDM out of the box. And then we have a deeper MDM integration, which has device data syncing. So when you connect Workbrew to your MDM using a read-only token, we'll use your MDM's database to get inventory data. So what are the names of all the devices, who are they owned by, and whatnot, so that you don't need to set up Workbrew and manually enter all the data. It just pulls it all in automatically, so it's really, really fast and simple to get set up. So we have those inventory syncing integrations with Jamf, Kanji, Fleet, Simple MDM, Microsoft Intune, and Jump Cloud today, and we're adding new integrations all the time. So if you're using Workbrew and there's something that's not integrated that you want device syncing, inventory syncing, just send us a message and we'll be happy to take a look at that. So this is the devices view. From this view, you can also drill down on a specific device and kind of get a view of its metadata and its inventory. So you can see here's the device, you can see serial number, all kinds of metadata, and then you get this table which shows you all the packages that are installed. And for every single package, you can see if it's up to date, when was it installed, why was it installed. So it could be installed because the user requested to install it, or it could be installed because it's a dependency of another package. You can see what version's on the device, what the latest version is in Homebrew, and then licensing information. And so this is really useful. You see there's tons of packages on here on this device. This is really useful for kind of auditing, responding for troubleshooting, or maybe responding to an incident. So you can go and you can drill down on one device and you can see what's on the device. If the user's having a problem, you can see what the problem might be. And maybe you had an incident and you need to check some metadata. This is really valuable for that. But another way to look at the same data is using the packages list. So from the packages screen, what you see is a list of every package in your fleet and its overall impact on your fleet. So let's go down here and look for a package that's familiar, like Git. So we can see that Git's installed on 9 different devices in this fleet. And if I click on this link, it'll give me the devices it's installed on. So I can see what the impact of this package is. And remember, all of this is the visibility functionality. So far, everything you've seen here is included in the free plan. You can also see buttons for upgrading, which is some of the remote management functionality. But you can see all the different packages, what devices they're on, what licenses they're using, what versions. And what's valuable about this is that you have one place to go for all packages. So you can see what's popular in my organization. What are the things that most of the engineers are using or most of the team is using? And how can I broaden the impact of those things? How can I bring that to more people and help them be more efficient? And similarly, you can go and you can look at what are the least used packages. So what are those things that are installed just on one device? Why are they there? Maybe they're not appropriate for your organization, or maybe there's a better option that's more standard for your company, and you can help those people follow the same path. A lot of the very large companies that I talk to, they're interested in standardizing their development processes and their development flows, and this is one of the ways that this can help them with that. But really, this comes down to peace of mind, because I get this question all the time, which is, we have Homebrew installed on 1,000 devices, but we have no idea what packages there are. So you can go here, you can find the packages, you can find all the versions. And if you know about a vulnerability, you can detect whether or not it might impact you. So going further on the visibility front, we have a couple more things. So I mentioned that Brew has this concept of taps, which are essentially the repositories of packages that you can install. And there are 2 official taps in Homebrew, Homebrew Core and Homebrew Cast. From the taps page in the Workbrew console, you can find a list of every tap that's in use in your company or in your fleet. And you can see what's being used from those taps, how many packages, or what devices are using those taps, and so on. And again, this is another very valuable visibility point of visibility, in that without Workbrew, you don't even know if third-party taps are in use. Third-party taps are incredibly valuable, and they can bring very useful software into your organization, but also they can contain any arbitrary software because anybody can make a tap. So you might want to be aware of what types of third-party libraries are being used and things like that. We also have a licenses overview, which will show you all the different open source software licenses and how many packages and which packages are using those licenses within your fleet. Some companies might have compliance requirements around, especially like GPL software, and they might want to limit their usage of certain GPL packages so they can see what's licensed in which way. And then lastly is analytics. So from the analytics tab, you can get a view and search into how Brew is being used in your organization. So you can see all the different brew commands that are being run on the different devices. And this is useful from an auditing perspective. So if you need to know when did something happen on a device or what happened on a device, you can pull that information pretty easily. And so everything that I've shown you up to this point is about visibility, and it's included in the free plan of Workbrew for unlimited users and unlimited devices. So next, I'm going to kind of move into the remote management functionality. And so I'll start by showing the default packages functionality. So this is built on top of something called Brew Bundle in Homebrew, in the Homebrew ecosystem. Brew Bundle is a tool that lets you write a configuration file, which is a declarative configuration file that says which packages should be installed. And then you use the Brew Bundle command, and Brew will install the packages as described in the configuration file. And so you could do this by writing a configuration file, putting it in a Git repository, and then having each of your engineers download the configuration file and run the Brew Bundle command on their device. But with Workbrew, you can actually create those configuration files right in the UI and automatically deploy them to devices based off of our targeting system. So in the example of maybe a web developing team, you might say they need Python installed, they need Postgres installed, maybe they need Git installed, and then they also want to have Visual Studio Code. So you can install any of the 15,000 packages, whether they're open source or desktop apps or whatever you like. And then you use the targeting feature to choose where to install these packages by default. So you can say install it on all devices, install it on a particular device, or you can choose, for example, our engineering team. And then when you create this brew file, what will happen is the packages in this list will be installed on all of those devices. And anytime a new device is added, they'll all be installed automatically onto those devices. So now you have a declarative way to manage what packages should be installed on which machines, and you can do it using a group system. So you can say, this team should have these 20 packages, this team should have these 20 packages. And so it's a really, really easy way to standardize the environments and have everything automatically installed as you like. This can be used in conjunction with those permission models that I was talking about, the restricted mode, managed mode, and guided mode. So for example, if you have maybe a data science team that uses Python and Jupyter notebooks and things like that, but they're not familiar with Brew, you could create a Brew file with all of those dependencies for them. They could be in restricted mode. All of those dependencies would be installed. They would never have to touch Brew, but they would get all the benefits of staying up to date, keeping it patched, and having it managed centrally for the entire team so it's consistent. So that's Brew files and default packages. And you can create multiple different sets of packages and assign them to different groups. The other thing I'll show you on the remote management topic is brew commands. So we have a system where you can go in here and you can create a brew command. And a brew command is kind of the low-level primitive within Workbrew for doing remote management. You can do, it's very, very powerful. You can do anything that brew can do. You just say, what's the command you want to run? So for example, we might want to say brew upgrade Python. And then you choose a target. So all devices, engineers, or a specific device, or whatever you like. And so in my case, I might choose all devices. And then you click create brew command. And when you do that, what happens is the command fans out into a number of runs. And a run is one instance of a command executing on a device at a particular time. And you can see whether or not that command's run was successful from the console, giving you kind of visibility into whether or not machines are up to date, or whatever task you're trying to do is happening correctly. And then if you need to, you can actually click here and get a full log output from the device. So this is as if you had gone around, your office to each of the developers' machines and typed in, brew upgrade Python and seen all the log output from each device. But you can do it in parallel. You can do it, across the world. It's very, very easy to do. But it's not just about upgrading packages. It's really anything that you could do with Brew. So you could do, for example, Brew pin, let's say, Postgres. And this would lock Postgres at its current version and prevent it from being upgraded. You could do, for example, brew tap, and then have the name of an internal tap, which would say, add this collection of packages to brew. So if you had an internal tap with your own internal tools, now you could add that repository of packages to every device in your fleet. And this works with targeting as well. But another thing here is if you do brew upgrade Python, you have a scheduling option. And so you can schedule this to run out in the future, or you can also do like a daily, weekly, or monthly schedule. So for example, you might want to make sure that Python is always on the latest version. So once a week, you want to upgrade it on certain devices. But this isn't something that we recommend you do as a blanket operation. Upgrade every package automatically every day. That might, cause some problems for your developers changing out the dependencies from underneath them. Instead, what you might want to do is set a set of rules for each package individually. So in the case of Python, we might say we want this to upgrade on a schedule, or whenever it's out of date. I just want Python always to be up to date. So whenever it runs out of date, we'll do an upgrade. Or maybe you want something a little bit less aggressive, and you want to say, whenever there's a vulnerability in Python, I want it to be upgraded. Otherwise, it needs to be manually upgraded by the user. So you can set these kind of command rules and scheduling on each command individually. So it's quite powerful. But really what we're doing over time is we're taking this primitive of brew commands and exposing it with more friendly user experience. So for example, from the packages page, if I go here, we have these upgrade buttons. What happens under the hood is if you see that Git is out of date, when you click upgrade, it will generate a command for you automatically, and then it will upgrade those packages through the command system. So with time, as we build more and more functionality into this, you don't need to be as much of a homebrew expert to use this. But if you know homebrew well, it's very powerful to use brew commands for remote management. And then lastly, after remote management is security and compliance. So I want to talk about the security and compliance features in Workbrew. And the most popular tool is our vulnerabilities dashboard. So what we do is we keep a list of all known software vulnerabilities that impact packages in Homebrew's Homebrew Core and Homebrew Cask taps. And we keep that with all the version information of what's impacted as well. And then we cross-reference that with every installed version on every one of the devices in your fleet. And we present you here with all of the known vulnerabilities in your fleet. Whenever a new vulnerability is detected, we'll send you an alert. We can send you a Slack message. We can send you an email alert. We can send you a webhook via our API. And then once we do that, you can come here and you can do remediation steps. So you can see what's the vulnerability. You can drill down, get information about the vulnerability, its severity, and you can make a determination as to whether you need to patch it or not, or what you should do, how you should handle patching it. In some cases, it might not be that severe, and you might prefer to send a message to your users and say, hey, we'd like you to upgrade this when you have a chance. In other cases, it might be very severe, and you just manage it for them. You just upgrade it on the spot. You click a button, it generates a command, it'll be patched, and vulnerability is resolved. So this is really, really valuable for companies who are worried about keeping things up to date and making sure that their vulnerabilities are mitigated and resolved. You always know what's vulnerable, and you have a path forward to manage this. Whenever companies start to use Workbrew, they're always writing back to us saying like, oh, I've already mitigated like 20 vulnerabilities across my fleet. And every day when I see a new one, we're just managing it this way. This is also a really great time to talk about the Workbrew API and data export functionality. So a lot of our users will say, what I really want is I want to track this vulnerability data, and I want it to send alerts to my SIM tool or some other logging tool. And so you'll probably notice throughout the entire application, there's this export data button on every table. So you click this, it gives you the ability to choose JSON or CSV, and then download the data from that screen. And this is powered under the hood by our API. So we have an API with API documentation, and you can see every single one of the endpoints. And in this case, we're looking at the API documentation for our vulnerabilities. So you can actually query the Workbrew API to see what vulnerabilities are there, or you can get a webhook. Whenever a new vulnerability is detected, you'll get a webhook to come and check here. And this is really nice because you can essentially stand up a service that will send this data into any kind of logging tool that you might be using. So we have had some companies where they're in very highly regulated industries, and whenever there's a vulnerability, they want to revoke VPN access. Or if it's a high severity vulnerability, they might revoke VPN access. So to do that, they'll have scanning running from Workbrew. When a vulnerability is found, they'll get an alert. They can use the API to find the data about the vulnerability, see if it's severe or not. If it's a severe vulnerability, they can find the impacted devices, and then they can use that data to trigger, a quarantine on the device. So this is really, really valuable for them. And then lastly, on the security and compliance front is what we call policies and brew configurations. So kind of the high level idea behind this is that you can set policies around what's allowed and disallowed, what you can do on your devices. But similar to brew commands, kind of the fundamental building block of this is called brew configurations. And a brew configuration, what I'll show you here is the Homebrew documentation. So in Homebrew, you can configure Homebrew on your machine using these configuration options. And if you look at the documentation for Homebrew, there's close to 100 different configuration options. And as Homebrew is built as a single player tool, it's meant for developers to set these on their machines themselves and configure them. But not everybody's a Homebrew expert. They might not know exactly what all these settings do. So what you can do as a Workbrew kind of administrator is you can use these configuration options in Workbrew like this to set the settings on all of your devices. So what I've done here is I've used the configuration option called Homebrew Allowed Taps, and I've set it to Homebrew Core and Homebrew Cask. And what that will do is if I target all of my devices rather than a specific group, I could do this with groups as well. But if I target all of my devices, what will happen is all of the devices in my fleet will be configured in such a way that they can only install official Homebrew packages. They won't be able to use third-party taps. This is a very common thing that companies would like to do, and they'll often add, other permitted taps here through some kind of a request process. So we could also add like another tap, which is our internal tap, which includes our internal tools. And by setting this, they're able to say, okay, we now know what the boundaries of Homebrew are. Because without setting this, Homebrew can install literally any software. You just make a tap, you put the software in there, and anything that you would ever want to install is available. The other big differentiation here is back to those permission modes. If a user is in restricted or managed mode, these configuration options are enforced, meaning that they can't be changed on the device. If the user has pseudo privileges and they're in guided mode, they're able to override these settings. They'll still get warnings about changing them, but they're able to as admins. So again, this comes down to the choice that the company wants to make, how they want to give access to this stuff. But the real kind of benefit here is that you have a central way to manage this configuration, and there's no possibility of it kind of drifting over time or across devices. It's always kept kind of the same everywhere. So some other things you can do here are like Homebrew, Forbidden, Formula. And you could say, for example, BitTorrent, OpenVPN, some packages you might not want on a work system. You can do other things here as well, including like, this is one that's popular. So this is called Homebrew Artifact Domain. Every time Brew on your end user device needs to fetch some kind of an asset to install a package or build a package, Brew will connect the public internet and it will download those things. When you set Homebrew Artifact Domain, rather than going to the public internet and pulling those packages, what Brew will do is it will go to your own internal mirror that you maintain. And it's still the same binaries, it's still the same files being installed, but now it's not leaving your network, it's inside your VPN, and it's coming from a system where you can run your own antivirus scanning tools, you can run your own IP checkers, you can run your own license and compliance checks. So for highly regulated industries, this doesn't give you, I wouldn't recommend this unless you have some kind of a regulatory requirement that says you need to do this, because you're going to install the same binary packages, the same stuff. But we've seen customers where they have a law that says they need to keep an audit log of every piece of software that enters their environment for a 5-year period. And then every time a piece of software enters their environment, they need to create a fingerprint of that software. They need to scan it for viruses and save a receipt they scanned it. They need to have a name of a person who reviewed it and signed off on it. And that's an overwhelming amount of work to do if you're doing that on every single device in your company. So instead, you can centralize the entry point to this artifact host, run a mirror internally, run some automated checks on it, and then every one of the devices in your fleet is pulling from there as well. So there's a lot that you can do, with brew configurations. And again, the more you know about Homebrew, the more functionality that you have here. And I'll just give you a little peek, but we're already building out. This is not publicly available yet, but we have this functionality called policies, which under the hood will use these brew configurations, but it will present you as a user with a much simpler interface for setting up these policies. So you'll be able to click and say, I want, these packages to behave this way. I want, these taps to be enabled or not enabled, and so on and so forth. So with that, I think I've come to the end of the demo. And I just want to say, thank you very much for the time today and for inviting me. I really enjoyed this. The last thing is just, if you're interested in trying this out, just go to workbrew.com. There's a button that says start free. Click that and create an account. Also, I'm on the Mac admin Slack. We have a channel there. It's called Workbrew. We also have a Homebrew channel that I'm in that all the Homebrew maintainers and other folks there are involved with. So feel free to join both of those and get in touch with us. And then I guess with the last remaining time, I'd be happy to take any questions and talk in more detail. But thank you.
Yeah, John, we have some questions on the chat. So
excellent. Let's see. Well, okay, I see the questions on the chat. So should I just go through these, or would somebody on the Mac admins team want to ask them for me?
Yeah, I can ask that question.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So the question is, will the brew or the Workbrew will, so we can see the list of applications installed, whether it shows the application installed by brew or it shows all the application installed on the devices.
Yeah, so from the devices page, you can drill down on one device and get a list of just the applications, the packages installed on that device. From the packages view, you can get a list of every package that's in your fleet. And then when you're on that package list, you have a devices dropdown or a devices link that you can click and get a list of the devices that only that one package is installed on. So you can do both.
Yeah. So and the next question is, how does Workbrew check for the vulnerabilities?
Yeah, so the way that the vulnerabilities checking works is we're not doing code scanning or anything like that. We're using known vulnerabilities databases. So we have several different data sources that provide information about known vulnerabilities. And we cross-reference that with all of the packages in the Brew ecosystem and also the different versions of those packages to see what's impacted. So we actually provide that as a service for users on top of Homebrew.
Yeah, I think next question is, does Workbrew protect against rolling an upgrade behavior of Brew? And can I decide which version of package goes on to a set of users?
Okay, so those are two separate things, and I'll address them one by one. So the first question is about doing rolling upgrades. Today, we don't have any functionality built into the tool to do rolling upgrades. We've had this request a number of times. The way to do that today is using device groups. You can create, for example, 3 device groups. You could have like a 10% group, a 50% group, and an 80% group, or whatever you want. Or you can say like, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. And you put the devices you want into those groups, and then you run a command or you set a configuration and you apply it to that group. And what this is useful for is, say you could do maybe your IT team first, or there's a couple friendly developers that can test configurations for you. You put those folks into a group and you deploy to them first, make sure everything's working, and then you deploy to everyone after the fact. In the future, we might add an automated feature for rolling updates, but that's how you could do that today. And then the second question is about, can I decide what version of a package is installed on a device? So today the answer is no, you cannot. There's a couple different caveats to that, but the answer is no. And let me explain why. So Homebrew as a package manager is what's called a rolling release package manager. That means that whenever a new version of software becomes available, it's immediately made available to everyone who uses Homebrew. This is in contrast to a package manager where they have like releases, like distribution releases. So if we compare this to another operating system like Ubuntu, Ubuntu has the apps package manager. And every time Ubuntu releases a new version of their distribution, they take a snapshot of all the packages. And those are the packages that exist for that version of that distribution. And then when the next version of the distribution comes out, they'll update all the packages as well. Within each release, they might update security vulnerabilities and bug fixes and things like that, but they won't upgrade major versions of software. With Homebrew, it's different. As soon as an upstream vendor provides a new version of software, it goes into Homebrew and the old version is removed and you can't install it anymore. There are a few packages in Homebrew where the upstream vendor has multiple supported versions at the same time. So a great example of this is like Postgres and Python. Those are packages where in Homebrew, you can actually go and you can find separate packages for separate versions of supported software from the upstream vendor. And so you can install those types of packages where the upstream vendor has multiple supported versions and they're popular enough to warrant having separate packages in Homebrew. But other than that, there's no way to install old versions of software. The only other thing that you can do is there's a feature in Brew called Brew Pin. And what Brew Pin does is it prevents a package from being upgraded. So let's say, for example, you have a package and it's on version 1.5. If you run Brew Pin 1.5, of that package, and then version 2 comes out and you run Brew upgrade, it will not be upgraded and you'll stay on the old version. But a new device that does not have the package installed cannot install version 1.5. That's a limitation of Homebrew, the open source project today. This is something we hear about all the time, and we are very interested in providing a solution to this for folks in the future.
John, can I just ask a follow-up question on that? That was my question.
Sure.
So
go ahead.
Is there a way like Homebrew downloads all of its package repository from, I think, formula JSON, right? Can we not pin it somewhere that, hey, the brew binary that Workbrew installs uses that version of the formula JSON so that it doesn't pick all of the packages that is on the latest brew? I don't want to update my brew. I want to keep it at a, let's say, tagged a version of brew repository in 2024, not in 2025. Something.
Yeah, I understand what you're asking. So just to give everybody else a little bit more context about this, under the hood, the way Brew works is there's a repository, which is the tap, which contains a list of definitions of all the packages. Those are called formula or casks. Inside those formula or casks is code that says how to install the package, where to get the binaries from, and whatnot. And when you update Homebrew, what's actually happening is all of those formula are updating. So you're getting new text files, new source code files that say where to download things. So the question is, could I just like use the old versions of those files and download that stuff? I mean, the short answer is yes, you could do that. It's not a supported thing. So like if you go to the Homebrew project and you say, I'm doing it this way, and something doesn't work, why doesn't it work? They'll say, well, you're not on the latest version. So good luck, right? But there are some things you can do there. However, I wouldn't recommend that you do that. Mostly because it's not supported, but also because if you want to try to do that at a fleet level, now you have to prevent every single one of your users from ever running Brew update. And you also, when you do that, you're locking all of the packages together. So there's no way to use like an old version of package 1 and a new version of package 2, because there might be dependencies within them. And then Brew needs to set all the, it's very, like, it can get very complicated very quickly. So I wouldn't recommend that, but yes, if you know how it works under the hood, some of that is possible, but it's not really exposed to the user.
Yeah, thank you. That makes sense.
Yeah, the next question will be how to get access to this console. You just showed us a console where we can see all this information. How we can get access to this console, or how for a particular environment. Say,
let me show you. The easiest way to show this is to give an example. So if I go to workbrew.com, this is our website. You just click Start Free up here in the corner, and then go to the free plan, click Start Free, and then you sign in with Apple, GitHub, Microsoft, or Google, and then you'll have your own setup. Very easy.
Okay. And then next question is there an option to integrate Workbrew with IDP like Entra or Google or Okta, so that we can use the Entra groups instead of creating a groups on Workbrew? So it is.
You all are asking all the best questions. So the answer to this is today, no, but yes, we're building that. So a lot of our customers have asked for this feature. The way that we're thinking about doing this is called device group syncing. And what we'll do is we'll look at your MDM tool first. And the challenge here is that we don't require your end users, the endpoints, to create accounts or log in. So we don't know who each device belongs to. So what we need is a data source that has device serial number and the group information, which usually involves knowing the person. The place that has all that data that's the easiest to get it from is actually MDM. All those MDM integrations that we have, we're looking at ways to sync in device groups from your MDM. But we've had a number of customers specifically ask about Entra identity as a way to sync that in. And so we'll look at that as well. So yeah, today we don't have that. But another thing that we can do is for any customers that need to set up a lot of groups at the very beginning, they can provide us with a data export of their group information, and we can set it up for them on the back end.
Yeah. So that's all from the questions in the chat. So if anyone have your questions, you feel free to unmute and ask your questions here.
Yeah, the other one I saw in there was the information for the Mac admin Slack. So there were some links to the Mac admin Slack, but also the channel name is just #Workbrew. And I'm in there, and Mike, my co-founder, is in there, and a lot of the Workbrew employees are in there. And feel free to just put a message in and ask us any questions anytime. Does anybody else have any other questions? Otherwise, I think we can. Yeah, go ahead. I think I heard somebody.
Just one question at the last. Like, how does the cost look like on this?
Yeah, so to the cost for this, so we have the free plan, which is all the visibility, functionality, and deployment. We have a self-serve plan. It's $10 per device per month. And then we have an enterprise plan, which is custom pricing. So that's something that, if you have, a lot of devices, let's say several hundred to several thousand, would make sense. Or if you have special needs, like you need your data to be in a private tenant, or it needs to be in a specific location, or you need custom deployment mechanisms like in your own private cloud or things like that. But yeah, that's how it's handled today.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. I had a great time, and I appreciate the invitation to come and talk to you all.
Yeah,
thank you, John. That was a wonderful session.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Bye.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.
So does the meetup end here, or what? I think you had some other